Coming up, in the second episode of Bias Tech Trends podcast, we host the inimitable Keith Witek, Chief Operating Officer of Tenstorrent and a very dedicated technology historian, and with whom we will discuss the new frontiers of AI and the technology challenges that face them.
Welcome to Tech Threads, Weaving the Intelligent Future, the podcast exploring the fast-paced world of technology. In each episode, we dive into the latest innovations in data movement, AI acceleration, and the transformative potential of chiplet technology. Join us as we explore the breakthroughs that shape the future of computing and hear from industry experts on what's coming next in the tech landscape.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Tech Trends podcast. I'm Witek and Nayampally, Chief Commercial Officer here at Biosystems, and today it's my pleasure to introduce a special guest and friend, Keith Witek, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Tenstorrent, where he leads the operations, the legal, the HR, the finance, the facilities, the compliance, licensing, and all other functions, and has been also pioneering some very interesting sovereign development programs across countries in Europe and Asia. And of course, this is just the latest in his game-changing roles alongside Jim Keller, who's the CEO of Tenstorrent and also well-known kind of technology architect. Prior to Tenstorrent, Keith led strategic alliances for Google's consumer electronics program that encompassed Pixel G chips, Fitbit, Nest, and other broader technologies. And he came to Google from Sci5, the company that launched the RISC-V licensable processors, where he was Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and General Counsel, structuring innovative industry partnerships and global business models for the adoption of RISC-V. An important stop on his list of greatest hits, shall we say, is the game-changing role that Keith played in his stint as Director of Technology Enablement and Associate General Counsel at Tesla, which is also in partnership or leadership, if you look at, from Jim Keller. And that has led to massive leaps in autonomous driving environment for R&D technology and development and deployment of the Tesla Model 3, which is now quite an iconic change in the EV space. And of course, prior to this, he spent about 13 years at AMD, where his last role was Corporate VP of Strategy and Corporate Development. And effectively, there's plenty more, but we'll stop here for now. Keith is also an industry specialist and passionate about entrepreneurship. And over the last decade has sat on the board of very interesting community projects like Starting Block Madison, where he helped entrepreneurs build innovative companies in the Midwest, and in turn led their ideas towards real businesses. So as you can tell, a very, very accomplished, I would call a celebrity, and we look forward to the discussion. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Nandan. It's great to be here talking with you again.
Great. And so, I'm looking to pick up this discussion from where we left it off a couple of years ago in our last podcast in different places. But firstly, I'd like to congratulate Tenstorrent and you in particular on the phenomenal fundraise of nearly $693 million that you kind of announced in December. Can you give us a bit of insight into that, and more importantly, the journey that you've been with Tenstorrent over the past few years?
Yeah, I joined Tenstorrent a little over 2 years ago. One of the things I picked up was a funding and IR team. We hit the road, and then for a round of funding, we went to 22 different countries, some multiple times, over the span of like 8 months, and raised about, over the course of about a year and a half, all told, raised about $800 million in capital and rolled it into this last round D of financing. And we're using that to get high performance RISC-V cores to market for the first time in the market. I think Sci5 and a lot of other companies out there in the market have driven RISC-V into embedded spaces and lower end spaces in terms of performance. But now we really want to bring them up into data center and mobile phone type classifications. And that's what we're doing. And we'll be launching that this year and next. We want to bring Galaxy boxes to market, which is basically bringing our combined AI RISC-V technology to high-end compute. We're building off of our success from Tesla here at Tens Torrent. We have a lot of the engineers from Tesla that followed us here to Tens Torrent. So we're going to hit the automobile industry and support a lot of developers and a lot of other verticals. And we're doing all that in an open platform. So, we don't want to build a super strong moat around the technology. We want to share the success with the customers, get a lot of people aggregating innovation to happen around that platform. And we think that's the way to win. So Linux is to Windows, kind of like what we want to be to like ARM and NVIDIA in the compute space. And a big role in that is our partnership with Baya. You guys recently raised some money, and you're doing an important component in the subsystems that we're building to make this happen. So congrats to you as well.
Thanks, Keith. Yes, I think it's been a pretty hectic journey for us as well. And as you know, Jim's been kind of a leader, a technology evangelist that sees both the opportunity and the problems that show up. And I think Baya is trying to solve one of those problems. And thanks for asking. We, in fact, as well raised 37 million, which seems small, but it's very perfect for our focus. And our goal is to really enable all the processing giants like yourself move data efficiently without having to worry too much about how the system design is done. Or let me put it another way, to simplify the process of system design so you can get these things to market much, much faster. And so, yes, we're looking forward to this partnership going forward.
Yeah, you guys are making great fabrics and great tools to make the design in of fabrics more flexible and faster. So yeah, we're using the technology. You guys are doing great.
Thanks. And so actually, I wanted to touch on one of the things you mentioned before, which I think is very important. The open platform approach that you're taking, which was also kind of the ethos of what RISC-V is trying to do, is more than just a statement, right? It has to be an execution as well. And I think what Tens Torrent's been doing is really about working through different sovereign programs where you can enable local or regional technology, which may be specialized for the challenges and the needs of that space to take off while benefiting from the global kind of ecosystem development around RISC-V and all that. So do you want to enlighten us a little bit more about this? Because I also remember 15 years ago, both you as a part of AMD, me as a part of ARM, we're looking at doing the same thing about democratizing compute and processing across different regions. So what's different now, and what changes are you seeing from that?
Yeah, what I think has happened now in the industry is more single source or oligopoly sourced pieces of technology have emerged in the supply chain. This hasn't been experienced in our industry in 60 years that it's been going on. So if you look out there and you look at CAD tools, there's really only two companies that can give you a full stack. If you want lithography exposure at the bleeding edge nodes, there's only ASML. Canon, Nikon, all these other guys are gone. Right? If you look at ARM's position in the cell phone market, they own 99+% of the cell phone compute market. And NVIDIA is trending there in AI. There's these control points all over. TSMC and Samsung are the last two foundries left in advanced nodes. So we're facing this world in a supply chain and a development chain where these control points are affecting innovation and your ability to be flexible in your supply chain and the decisions you're making in time to market. And it's something we've never faced before. This consolidation of control points in the market. And it's not just companies, big companies like Apple and Google and Amazon and Baidu and Tencent and Alibaba that are thinking about this. It's all the companies out there thinking about how they're going to deal with this in terms of making their supply chain work right with the proper choices to allow them to be successful. And openness plays a big part in that. And it's resonating because it's not just at the big company level, and I just mentioned some, it's at the country level. So we've announced a big deal at Tens Torrent that we've done with Japan. We're in discussions with at least 10 more countries that are very interested in adopting open platforms. Why? Because they don't want to make tens of billions of dollars of investment into critical infrastructure like transportation and healthcare and data centers and then have a monopoly tell them you don't get access to that technology anymore unless you pay me multiples more in terms of revenue. Or I'm going to supply you 12 months after I supply your competitors or your competing countries. They want to be able to be at the bleeding edge and do the solutions they want when they want them and be able to bring it to market to make their customers and their citizenry happy. They can't do that under like a monopoly, single source or dual source control in the supply chain. And on top of that, the trade wars are driving these guys nuts. It's the reality we live in now. But with China and the US kind of fighting with each other and the tariffs being put on people, which we all know all too much about right now, right? Even Canada, Mexico, and others are not immune. So you get these other countries saying, if I'm going to make this investment, I really have to be careful what ecosystem I'm investing in. I'd like it to be sovereign. I'd like it to be on soil. I'd like to control it. I'd like to change it. I don't want some bureaucrat to sign something tomorrow and deny me access to something I've invested $100 billion into. And it's that business model that we're bringing to market to ensure that comfort and investment in technology can still exist on a global scale.
Now that I think is a very valid point, right? I think, in fact, if you just go back to 10 years ago, as we talked about, ARM was kind of the democratizing factor, right? Even though it's a proprietary architecture, it was strewn across a lot of partners. As we see now, the move towards customization and the value of the ecosystem, we need reduction in control points. Right? So I for certain see x86 still continuing. Is there's so much legacy still left in it. ARM will be there, but RISC-V becoming a very important third leg of that stool.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's room, Renee Haas, a friend of mine, has said this, Will, Abby, others, they're great executives and are companies like, Qualcomm, MediaTek, they wouldn't exist today had it originally been for ARM providing those services and IP. So they're a legendary, iconic company in the supply chain. And there'll always be a place for them.
Yep.
Linux didn't make Microsoft go out of business. And
Exactly.
Android didn't drive iOS and Apple out of business. So I think, like Renee Haas says too, there's a place for both of these in the market. It's just right now we need to bring the open platforms to market to get the benefit I talked about. And without that choice, I think the market will suffer. And I know ARM executives that say the same thing. It's not necessarily bad for them, bad for anybody. It's just putting choice into the market. And I think they also agree it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, the overall idea is doing this actually expands the overall playing field for all of us, right?
Yeah.
As a having spent 16 plus years at ARM, I know the ethos, I know the motivations, and they are about pushing innovation everywhere. And this just adds to a more interesting portion of innovation, because always adversity or scarcity becomes a real motivator for innovation.
Bigger sandbox, more people playing in it, and all of us moving faster with new ideas. That's the goal.
Great. So I think this also is a nice leaping off point to talk about AI in kind of where's it going, right? So we are where we are. I believe we're scratching the surface. And, a lot of the bigger players are taking things into their own hands, right? Design platforms, because it's not just about hardware. Both of us, as having been prior hardware gearheads, so to speak, lean towards it, but it's about the overall system, the overall service that can be developed. And it is getting more and more specialized, more and more customized, and more and more expensive if you don't do it right. Right. So I'd love for you to, you're at the forefront. What kinds of things are you seeing coming forward? Right. Where do you see us going in the next 3 to 5 years? Because if I look at PricewaterhouseCoopers, they claim by 2030, nearly 15 trillion worth of contribution from AI towards GDP. Where does that come from?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'll have spent a lot of time thinking about this, and sometimes it's hard to get your head around it because it's such a big, open kind of topic to discuss. But let me try to start from the top and work my way down. And change is hard, even when you're experiencing good change, right? If you buy a new house, or you go to a new job, or you have a new child enter the family, anything like this, it's good change, but it's still stressful. And AI is creating a lot of change around us, and it's going to bring with it, some stress. And, one of the things that I think is different this time around is we've all read about the printing press, and we've read about, the kanjian, or we've read about, the computer, the PC, all these innovations, the automobile. It changed how we did things, but these innovations didn't do things humans couldn't already do. They just did things that we were doing more efficiently. What we're seeing with the advent of things like AI, coupled with big data, coupled with quantum compute, right? With basically a sea of data being collected at the edge every day, these systems can now do things humans couldn't have done before. They're asking questions we weren't smart enough to ask, and then answering these questions. And so we're going into a new age of kind of innovation where it's like the innovation may be out in front of us. And that's a little unnerving. And we see it with even, super smart people, Elon Musk and Sam Altman and others having these discussions out in the open. So I think this is a difference in the innovation. This isn't an efficiency game for humankind. This is taking us to a new place where we may be following the invention and not the other way around. And that's going to require a lot of thought. So on that note, what I'd like to say is now I'll bring us down from 50,000 feet, maybe down to 10,000 feet, and talk a little bit more, feet on the ground, which is, I just talked with somebody yesterday whose son is pretty damn smart and plays a lot of video games, and he's 6 years old. They booted up some AI tools and allowed him to talk to the computer to develop a video game. So the kid was just explaining to this AI tool what he wanted. It would throw it up, he'd play it, he didn't like it, so he'd iterate on the game, all in English. And the parent, who's a very good architect here at Tens Torrent, said, in all fairness, I did have to write 5 lines of code to fix something I thought was silly. But out of the thousands of lines of code my son wrote just by talking to a computer to create a video game, I had to get in there and write 5 lines. And that's probably a bug fix they could fix in 3 days. So he goes, this is how the world is going to change. And there's some profound things, Nandan, if you'll permit me, this is one thing that you and I wanted to talk about. I'm going to try to go through this quickly, which is if you look at how a market profoundly changes over time. Now, one of the things I think we should look at is the automobile business and autonomous driving, something that I've been involved in a very, very big way, right? And when you look at autonomous driving, let's imagine a world where cars are driving themselves anytime they want to any place without a human being needing to be in there. Let's think about what that does. One thing is, if you run the numbers for Uber and you know that you use your car maybe 3 to 5% of the day, and your car can be out there 95% of the day making you money, if you run the numbers on what you pay an Uber driver for the rough time you're in the car, you get to numbers like $400,000 your car can monetize for you a year while you're not using it. Now, if your car can do that, is Ford Motor Company or Tesla going to sell you a car for $30,000 when it can be monetized to the tune of $400,000 a year? No, they won't. So who then can afford to buy that car? Does the car become only for the rich people? Is the car something that a company that doesn't exist today, or maybe Hertz or somebody else aggregates up and we rent and timeshare the use of that car over time? How does this change the business model, right? How are the cities and the municipalities organized? If you don't need these big parking areas and you don't have to park on the street, you can redesign the entire city infrastructure based on autonomous cars. It changes what cities look like. Insurance companies, I've talked to the biggest ones. They say they're not sure they can even insure cars anymore because the people that are going to have the data to do that best are the ones either operating the car or making the car to begin with, like Tesla. Mm-hmm. They'll have access to the data. So American Family Insurance or Allstate or State Farm, they want to get out of the business, and they're starting to write that off in their numbers. You think about truck drivers. Autonomous driving is going to first be adopted in long-haul transportation of inventory between known points along known routes. So guys like Walmart, right, Walgreens, hospitals, right, will supply themselves with automated truck rolls. And what happens to the 3.5 million truckers that are employed and working in this country right now? I mean, these are the kind of impacts I think technology makes. And we all talk, like you and I, we know the technology very well. We know the business very well. And we're talking about contracts and supply chain and speeds and feeds. What we don't often think about is the social, environmental, and human impact of this technology. And just autonomous driving alone is profound. And I could go on and list 12 more things, right? Yep. And A last comment, and then I'll see if you have any thoughts on this. I was talking with some pharma executives sitting down with some quantum computing, like PsiQuantum and some other guys, executives. We were sitting in Scotland. We were having some scotch, so the ideas were flowing, right? And they said, okay, we're getting to the point right now. Google surprised some people by releasing some AI engines and advanced compute that predicted protein folding in a way that just shocked the medical industry. Well, how did we do this in such a short period of time? ChatGPT shocked the hell out of everybody, including Google, right? And so these disruptions are coming at us, like machine gun fire. And they said, one of these days in the not too distant future, we're going to figure out how to model biology on a computer machine. And then we're going to find things like the cure for cancer. And we're going to go, oh, that's what it was. Wow, that's amazing. So I put together a $1 billion or maybe $100 million computer, and I ran it for 10 minutes, and it found the needle in the haystack, and it says, if you guys really want to cure cancer, all the BS and politics and crap aside, and all the profit the market's making, this is what you do. It is a shot we all get at 2 months old, and you'll never have cancer for the rest of your life. Now, the pharmaceutical industry flushes $300 billion into R&D research, and most of it goes straight down the drain with no ROI. They sell about $1.8 trillion in product. The collective of the market cap for these companies is approaching $10 trillion. If you're a compute company that can get the cure for cancer and save all that wasted capital and partner with somebody in India that can take pharmaceuticals to market, are you going to sell that solution for a 40% markup? Or are you going to completely disrupt the industry because you now own the technology that matters in the industry, which is finding the cure? That's what
Mhm.
the pharmaceutical companies are trying to find. You found it. You have it in your hand. What are you going to do to monetize that and provide value for your shareholders? The hits that are going to hit companies in verticals that aren't even thinking about technology are going to hurt the most if they don't see them coming. I have rugby and football players that tell me the hits that hurts the most are the ones you don't see coming. And nobody is thinking about these. Well, not nobody. Very few people are thinking about the impact of owning, controlling, participating in the AI and technology business to protect your interests in your verticals, your shareholder value, your market caps, your customers, your employees. This could change everything. And it is. Every 6 months, it can surprise us. Go ahead, Nandan.
No. I think this is fair, right? I think, I mean, you amongst the 50 different things that have come in just the last year, even 3 months ago, it was DeepSeek, right? It's a bit of a change on, uh, oh, I can do this a lot more efficiently, smaller. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do more complex models. It just means my new complex models may be more accurate or more capable. Um, I completely agree with the idea that a lot of this disruption is in areas that you haven't thought of before, right? So, in fact, you were talking about cars and rentals. Yes, the timeshare model makes great sense. It changes a lot of the cost structure and
Yep.
the usage structure. And then the question is, do you rent a car for your driving pleasure? Because certainly you don't need it for your commuting pleasure. Commuting is never a pleasure. So effectively, I think it also makes people rethink lifestyles to some extent or needs to some extent as we go along. Um, I also see, having been on the very sensor side of things, I think the personalization aspect of how, today big data, AI is much more data aggregated, and there's a lot of intelligence coming in from there. The personalization, especially when it comes to things like health, or my close sensors, that starts becoming much more interesting because it's not just taking the benefits of the global, it is optimizing to the local because that's what is needed. And often, as you said, insurance, the current medical setup is geared towards kind of the standard flow mainstream as opposed to the exceptions. Right. And the exceptions are the ones that cause big lawsuits and things like that because they pass the standard sieve and don't get treated at the right point. So
And we
completely
see
agree with you.
this. Sometimes
Yeah.
it takes a big innovation to change the way we think about things, right? And uh, AI is going to do that in a lot of verticals. In a lot of verticals where we were stuck with the status quo, doing the same thing, monetizing the same thing we did the last 10 years, maybe with 3% more improvement, is going to turn it on its head and change it in 400% in 3 days. And that's going to be good for some people and bad for some people, but it's a price we're going to have to pay for the innovation and the change. It's coming, and many people aren't thinking about it and aren't really trying to get involved and drive it, control it. There's going to be winners and losers.
I think, yeah, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game because hopefully it ends up being a bigger market overall. But you're right in what you said. The ones that don't see it coming will probably feel it the most. And so overall statement that comes everywhere, if you put up your Instagram reel, it's about get educated about AI.
Absolutely. You hear it everywhere. You hear, people in retail, people in manufacturing, people in the entertainment business. I mean, if AI goes the way it's going, we're not going to have any actors in 10, 20 years. They're not going to exist. They're going to be replaced with
celebrity avatars.
Absolutely, right? You won't have to pay them 20 million. You won't have to put up with all their annoying, comments and stuff. And, they need a special dressing room. It's like, okay. And you don't have to work out. You don't have to change. We're just going to render you the way we want you rendered. And we're not going to pay. We're going to pay a guy sitting at a computer to do it for us. It's not that far away.
Oh, taking from that point back to somewhat of our reality, so to speak. If I look back 5 years to 7 years when some of these seeds were put in place, because companies like Google with its TPU and Amazon with its Graviton and Inferencia saw that the changes coming, both from the need for specializing or customizing compute perspective, right? But also from the disruption in the cost structures that they needed, right? So do you see this trend? I mean, I see the same thing happening. Tesla was obviously clearly a pioneer in taking into its own hands what it needed from a hardware and a full stack perspective. Apple's done it for multiple decades, and it's one of their points of success. How do you see this transition happening in the broader world, right? And what are the both technological and business challenges you see, and how do we see, as the two of us, addressing them?
Yeah. I think there's going to be, if you want to split it out into simple classes to get your head wrapped around it, there'll be two types of companies out there. There'll be companies out there that just want to be a channel to market on innovation and critical products and technology and services other people are innovating and owning that they need for their channel to market, right? We saw this, for example, and not knocking anybody because you can live in either of these worlds and still be successful. But like HP was taking technology from Microsoft and Intel. Microsoft and Intel were getting 30, 40% operating income every year, and HP was struggling to, do what they could do. And eventually, there was issues that happened, existential crisis at HP and other companies, right? Compaq and Gateway and IBM, who was in the PC business, right? Because they just didn't own and control the technology in their segment that their customers cared about and that really provided the value for the product. So there's smart people out there like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Bezos and many others that say, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm going to own the core technology that matters to my business. And I'm not going to have it be margin stacked to the point where I'm giving all my money to somebody else on really high margins and there's none left for me at the end of the day and I've got no leverage. So Elon, for example, he owns the battery technology with Panasonic and others. And he knows that he's got that in his hand. And autonomous driving, Jim Keller's team, my team, gave that to him and he's monetizing it and he owns that technology. He's driving innovation on that platform and he's setting the narrative. And he's doing that in many places. He owns it's almost like a car company, General Motors, owning the entire fuel chain supply, right? He owns basically the gas stations and his superchargers. And why did he do that? Because he knew that charging was going to be important for getting the value out of your car, and he wasn't going to leave that to somebody else to gouge him and his shareholders on margin. So he's making very rational decisions on a holistic 360 ecosystem view, and critical technology he needs to own, he owns and controls. And stuff that he can amortize and aggregate for lower cost because it's really not important to it's important you have tires on your car, but he's not making his own tires because he's got choice there with rational price So he doesn't feel like he needs to invest his opportunity cost and skill set there to innovate. And he's making very rational choices. And he's awarded with, a $1 trillion market cap where BMW's at like 50 billion. And that's how this is going to work going forward with AI and other technology that's emerging right now that, Baya and Tenstorrent are enabling. There's going to be companies that 100x their valuation by using it properly. There's others that are going to struggle.
That's fair. And now we kind of talked about the overall stack, especially the software, which really moves the fastest. But having said that, hardware and semiconductors in particular also have to start becoming more agile for this.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I see is first it was discrete components, right? Discrete CPUs, GPUs that were connected together on boards. Then it became systems on chip. But clearly, even that hasn't been as agile as you need as you start scaling businesses, scaling use cases. And the chiplet world that AMD kind of utilized by pioneering some parts of it on how they came to market with it actually has launched them back into their second coming, if you will, right? And chiplets seem to be the path where to some extent, there's more democratization if we do it right. Currently, it's very vertical, right, and walled garden, if you will. But really, I think the industry starts getting best of breed if we start making this chiplet world work. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. You guys are very close to it. We are seeing the opportunity, but I wanted to start with your view, and then we can have a little bit more of a discussion on that.
Yeah, I do think the chiplet business, the chiplet technology that already is there, that Apple is driving, that AMD has driven, that the FPGA houses started driving way back in like 2008, that IBM and Intel were experimenting with under the moniker of multi-chip modules back with the Pro and everything in the 80s. All this is now culminated and grown into proprietary kind of patches of flows at the OSAT packaging houses and foundries and OEMs that are getting this right. I think what we need to do now is bring standards to this business and let more of the Legos plug in with each other so that we can go to market faster. I mean, the benefits are huge. If you have to bring all your technology to a 2 nanometer node, you're spending way too much money for too little benefit because not all of your design's benefiting, right? If you pull it back, like, Broadcom did back when 20 nanometers was having trouble. I remember they made the announcement saying that, thank you, we'll stay back on 28. Well, they wouldn't have to be forced to make that decision at chiplet world. They could take the stuff to 20 that was really important to them and they felt like it was worth paying for and keep the stuff back at 28 or, 32 or, 65 nanometer if they wanted to, and they would optimize their cost points and just put it together with like Legos in the packaging part of the supply chain. So you can go to market in 3 to 6 months, not 3 years with a new monolithically designed integrated circuit. There's so much advantages with chiplets, but it does come with some issues, right? There's known good die issues and yield may be impacted. So there's tens of thousands of more PhD man years that need to get put into this to have it be perfect, but it's well on its way and it's been over 20 years in development. It's proprietary. We're moving it to non-proprietary with open systems. And once we do that, I think there'll be a lot of goodness and a lot of people that can play in the hardware silicon chip side of the business that aren't playing there today. It's going to open up another bigger sandbox with more people playing in it for more experimentation and more innovation, driving the industry forward. And chiplets is going to enable that. I believe that.
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? So I firmly think it's a path of agility and time to market. And reuse as well. And so what doesn't need to change stays where it is. It's proven and even cost amortized. What's new can move there. Plus, then you do it in granules that you can scale to larger granules or larger components. And overall, I think my view on this is not that different from yours. I to some extent, chiplets can be a way of delivering IP as well. Right. So if you think about, hey, I can do it in the software design as RTL, but if I take away some of your headaches of actually fabricating it to the right capabilities that we have, then it becomes another vehicle. And you can see ARM kind of doing things of that nature as well. Hey, let's take charge of getting you the best possible view of my processor and maybe my subsystem, right? So it's a natural transition to some extent. So from my standpoint, also, I think we see that as a great opportunity for scale, and there are plenty of problems to solve that we think we can solve, right? So how you design the fabrics for it, how do you do the partitioning for it, how do you make sure that what you're trying to design for is known in the hardware system right throughout, and as requirements change, as future proofing is required, it's built into the design flow and your deployment flow. I think that's kind of our calling card, which seems to be very aligned with what you're kind of alluding to and what we see the market kind of demanding.
Yeah, and I think what you will also enable is, I mean, you're building tools that make very complex designs that were very high risk and required a lot of talent in the past. Make it faster, better, cheaper, less risky, quicker time to market, higher chance of success with the tools you're building on fabrics. And that's going to allow people to enter the business. If you can grab Legos off the shelf and we were doing a lot of this in the early days at Tesla, with a small amount of people with the right ecosystem outside of your company that can pull the pieces together, with 12 engineers in a place like Ford Motor Company or Walmart, you could really design a silicon solution, farm out some pieces for the interposer to India, test bench goes to Indonesia to a services company. You have an architect pulling the Legos together. You're helping with Baya and the tools to do the right data movement on the platform. And you got a solution, and it's going to completely disrupt the supply chain. There's going to be fissures between the IP guys and the SoC guys, fissures between the OSAT guys and the fab guys, fissures between the system integrators. They might be able to skip over guys like Intel and Qualcomm and go make the integrated solution themselves directly with the supply chain. Chiplets will allow that. And there's going to be winners and losers in this, and that change is coming with chiplets. And an interesting thing is I pointed this out to a couple folks, mathematically, if I shuffle a deck of cards and I lay them out on the table here from card 1 to card 52, what is the chance that that sequence of cards has ever existed in the human condition before? And the answer is 0, because it's 52 factorial. That combination never existed before. So imagine the power of putting 52 interconnectable, maybe even optically connected, so the latency and throughput isn't affected, and that technology gets better and better every year, right? I've watched the startups, I've watched the big companies. If you were to put that system together with 52 different pieces in almost any assortment you want, can you imagine the power? That's worth working hard at.
Indeed. And as they say, time flies when you're having fun. And I can't believe we've gone through almost 40 minutes. And I appreciate you taking the time. But before I fully thank you for showing up and making a very, very interesting discussion happen here. What would you like to leave our listeners with in terms of either the industrial statement about where we're going, or anything you want to tell us about TenStore?
Well, I think I'll close on the open platform concept. It's really easy to fight with each other to take more of the pie. I think open platforms make a bigger pie and we all get a bigger piece. And I know sometimes that's not easy to do, as human beings and as organizations, but I would say join the open movement, contribute to it as best as you can. Let's help each other all float. I don't want to mix metaphors, but, raise the boats higher, get the tide rising higher for all of us. You could fight over pieces later, but I think right now what we really need is to accelerate the market, especially with the kind of trade war things and other things we see happening today. And we're running into barriers like Moore's Law is not what it used to be. Some say it's dead. It's certainly slow, right? And it's not giving us those returns anymore. Everything was getting more expensive going to advanced nodes. Most people won't afford to go to 2 nanometer anytime soon. We can solve those problems at the system level with partnerships, standards, open platforms. That's what TenStorm stands for. I know Baya's passionate about it. We're not going to do it alone. We're going to do it with help from a lot of other people. We're looking for those people to join that fight, and I hope people join. And if we do, I think we're going to actually keep Moore's Law going, but just in a slightly different way.
Well said. Well said. I think like most things, right, these are initiatives and almost things that end up being not exactly revolutions, but effectively movements, shall we say, that change. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you and the rest of the world on that. So with that, thanks again, Keith. Really appreciate you coming in, and look forward to continued growth from strength to strength, pretend strength, and hopefully in lockstep with us.
Excellent, Nandan. All the best to you and Baya, and we'll keep partnering. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to Tech Threads, Weaving the Intelligent Future podcast. Join us monthly for insights into the evolving tech landscape and the future of chiplet technology. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network, and stay tuned for more expert discussions. Let's weave the intelligent future together.